so much for your early morning into the office before it was opened.
Yeah, well, I got in.
Welcome to Durham College and our global classroom. It's a journalism fundamentals class for our journalism mass media first year here in Oshawa, Ontario. And
great.
You're in. Can you just tell the students where you are?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver, Washington, which I always have to immediately say is outside of Portland, Oregon, because people get the geography a little wrong. We like to call ourselves the first Vancouver, but I think that's probably just sour grapes. Yeah. I'm part of Washington State University, which is a statewide university that has multiple branches and part of leading a nationwide project here in the U.S. Called the Digital Polarization Initiative. That's about these sorts of things.
Well, thank you so much. I was wondering, have you worked with many Canadian institutions?
You know, I actually get asked to do presentations. We don't work with any Canadian institutions, but I've done a number of presentations in Canada on this. And there's also a Canadian group called Civics, which does K-12, which we've worked with to produce a number of videos. They do a project called Student Vote or something. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but like it's like a mock student vote thing in the K-12 system. And so we built some videos with them on some of these subjects for students.
Great. Well, thank you so much and welcome. I think as we are chatting, Elgin has managed to get the volume correct. So I hope you're able to hear us okay.
Yep.
So, shall we?
All right. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it. All right. Are you seeing something that says the fast and frugal needs of the online reader?
Sorry, say it one more time.
No,
I'm sorry. Are you seeing something? Are you seeing a slide at this point?
Yes. There we go. Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Let's do it then.
Okay.
So I usually start off with this. I usually tell this tale of two websites. This is the first website. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics is an organization founded in the 1930s, 60,000 members, 400-something full-time employees, annual budget of, I think 80 million a year, flagship journal Pediatrics, widely considered to be one of the premier resources on the health and well-being of children and adolescents. This here is the American College of Pediatricians. Now, the American College of Pediatricians was founded in 2002. It has 2 full-time employees. The AAP had a budget of 80 million. These people have a budget of somewhere around $80,000 a year. They were founded in 2002 as a political advocacy group to protest the adoption of children by same-sex couples, and their primary activity is sending out press releases to reporters, trying to get reporters to cover them as a major organization with opinions, which they are not. I mean, they do have opinions, but they're not a major organization. They're a 2-person advocacy organization with somewhere around 400, 300 members. So it should be really easy to tell these 2 sites apart. Recently, an experiment in Stanford tested the ability of people to do that. They took Stanford students, professional historians, and professional fact checkers. They gave them 5 minutes on each site. And then they asked them a simple question: which one of these sites would be a more reliable source of information on issues around school bullying and the psychological health of students? The first group was the professional historians. They took the professional historians because historians are deep critical thinkers. They're schooled, you know, in this case, they've had, you know, 20 years of schooling or more on how to think critically. They have experience thinking about documents, about bias, about agenda. They're natural investigators. Historians, if you think about it, are detectives of a sort. And their idea was that they would apply these skills to evaluating these two sites. Now, in the graph that I'm about to show you, the first section of the graph is the historians that chose essentially the correct site. The American Academy of Pediatrics is the more reliable. That is, I think, in red. And then the second section is those historians that chose the site that has been labeled by the Southern Poverty Law Center in the Human Rights Coalition as a hate site as the correct one. That will be in orange. And then the blue is the historians that after 5 minutes of investigation on both of these sites could not decide which was the more reliable source. Now, keep in mind, the historians here were told that they could do anything they wanted in terms of going anywhere on the internet. You know, just do what you normally do. They have a computer in front of them. And so here are the results. Now, the takeaway for me on this is that 50% of historians, after 10 minutes of investigation, could not say which was the more reliable site. The group founded in the 1930s with an $80 million budget, flagship journal Pediatrics, one of the most respected journals in the world, or the two-person press release producing political advocacy group with an anti-LGBT agenda, right? So 50% of historians after 10 minutes of investigation. So the next group is Stanford students, and the Stanford students have some stuff going for them. They're top of class, right? Stanford is not a slacker institution. Digital natives, heart of Silicon Valley. These are the people that grow up to actually run Google and Amazon and Twitter and those sorts of organizations. And they're a demographic broadly supportive of LGBTQ issues. So if nothing else, maybe we just get confirmation bias for the win here. So here's how the Stanford students did. 64% of the Stanford students chose the American College of Pediatricians. 16% were unsure, and 20%, only 1 out of 5 of these students chose the American Academy of Pediatrics as the more reliable site. You know, the last slide of historians, I often call that critical thinking meets the web. I call this one Gen Y slamming into the web like a brick wall. I mean, this is kind of horrific stuff. Last group, professional fact checkers. They had a mixture of backgrounds, including one Wikipedia editor. No specific knowledge of medical associations or anything like that. They didn't really come here with any domain knowledge. And the fact checkers, 100% get it right. And they get it right fast, right? The other people take the full 10 minutes in many of these cases. The fact checkers are often, some of the fact checkers are getting it done in less than a minute. So what's going on here? Well, the thing I have been looking at since 2016, a little before that, but not in a directed way, is the difference between people who are good at the web, who don't get fooled by these things, and the people that get fooled. And the fact checkers, what the fact checkers did was they immediately came to the site and they got off the page, right? So they immediately come to the site and they open another tab. They do a search. They start looking at this American College of Pediatricians search here, and immediately you can see that this doesn't answer your questions, but it raises the questions you need to ask. You start to see that Psychology Today has called it an anti-LGBT group. The Wikipedia thing says it's a conservative advocacy group. You can see over on the side that it's founded in 2002, small number of members, small budget, right? Now, what did the students, what did the historians do? They both actually used the same set of techniques. They did what we've told them to do in their classes for, 12, 16, 20 years. They came to the page of the site here that is out there to fool you, and they just read it, and they read it deeply. They looked at it top to bottom. They maybe skimmed it first, and then they evaluated the arguments, and they looked and they said things like, well, there's footnotes, there's footnotes here, and the footnotes seem to be good. There was one historian that even says, oh, this is I think this is a more reliable site. It's got a footnote to this journal Pediatrics, which is a respected journal. They actually chose the hate site citing Pediatrics, which is the journal of the other site that they either rejected or did not see. They didn't look into it. They didn't even know that the other site was the publisher of Pediatrics, right? This leads into a bigger problem about disinformation in general. We tend to think that students and journalists and so forth are missing critical thinking skills, but what they're really missing are web literacies, right? So a little background to that in terms of disinformation and misinformation. If we think about the old media literacy paradigm, we have this. We have 1984, 1948, this idea of misinformation and disinformation as an access problem, right? So, if you know the novel 1984, which is really based on the reality of the Soviet Union and some other Soviet states in 1948, Orwell just flipped those digits. The model people feared there was that the government would limit your access to information, right? The model they feared was that there would be limited access to platforms of speech, and that your mind would be shaped by the restriction of access to information. And in this environment, because there is such limited access, the reader must look at these limited artifacts that sort of arrive at their doorstep and look deeply at them and reveal their inherent contradictions, right? The logical flaws, right? So deep reading, close reading, critical reading. That's not where we are today. In 2018, we have a filter problem. The users of the web are overwhelmed by information, and the scarcity is actually attention, right? Our minds are not shaped by restriction of access to information. Our minds are shaped by the hacking of cognitive overload, right? A psychological phenomenon. And the critical reader has to decide what to read, right? What to choose to read among a confusing array of options. Decisions here are not made after an hour of deep investigation. They're made often in seconds. And this is the important thing, I think. If you are reading disinformation, right, information out there meant to fool you, pretending to be something it isn't, right? If you're reading that deeply, they've won. That's precisely what everything they've constructed is meant to engage. Once they have engaged you, they're engaging you on their own terms, and that's their goal, right? Is to get you to read this stuff deeply. So in this environment, what we've proposed and what we've worked with is this idea that rather than deep analysis, people need heuristics. People need rules of thumb. People need quick ways to sort information, to filter information. And what we know from other domains is that rules of thumb in situations that require speed in the face of uncertainty, rules of thumb often outperform deep analysis. What are our rules of thumb? So this is one. It's called investigate the source. And it's really simple. You'll see this will loop around again. Just, is the source what you think it is, right? If it's not, reapproach the source and discard it, you know, if it seems to be an imposter. And so what we see here in this looping GIF is we come to a source. Before we even read it, we jump up into that omnibar. We type in that term Wikipedia in a way that's just going to trigger a search from the omnibar and float that Wikipedia source to the top. And that's going to immediately give us this page. And what we see, even on a scan of the page, is the article that we're looking at, which we might think is, oh, this is an interesting point about Antifa and journalists. It's run by a legitimate, or I mean legitimate's a funny word, but it's run by a well-known white supremacist organization. And I could go into the background of this particular organization, but trust me, it's not a tough call with this one. This organization has said some very ugly things in the past, and is really for, I mean, has advocated for racial separation. So the idea here is that when you look at the source, you're looking really to see if you're surprised by what it is. We tend to not focus so much on the idea of bias as position to know. Does this group have the expertise that they need to make these statements? And when I initially came to the site and I initially formed a reaction, was I forming it based on correct assumptions about what this site was? A core piece of this is the web is abundant, right? So if you come to a site like this and it turns out that this site is not what you need it to be, you just go find another source, right? You're not, again, it's not 1984, it's not 1948. You're not restricted to this one source. You can go find a source that hasn't been outed as a white supremacist organization. Find the original is one of our second techniques. Now, the idea here is that as information travels across the web, it gets what propaganda studies people call leveled and sharpened, right? So, you know, an initial story that deals with a scuffle between like maybe a Hillary Clinton supporter and a Trump supporter at some protest. You know, a fight breaks out between two people arguing. You know, to level that, we might, you know, we could do it for either side here. We might make the Clinton supporter, we might say that the Clinton supporter didn't provoke at all, right? We might remove the fact that both sides were arguing before the fight broke out to make it seem as if the Trump supporter just attacked this person without provocation. We might sharpen it. We might add details to it that don't exist. We might make the Clinton supporter a World War II veteran who cares for a sick grandchild. You know, we add details to it to try to give it more emotional impact and make it more inflammatory, right? So leveling and sharpening. And as news travels across the web, it gets leveled and sharpened, both by bad actors, but also by clickbait artists, people that want to get people to click, try to make things more inflammatory so people click. So we encourage students to find the original. Now, what you see here on this looping GIF is a claim that U.S. President Obama has said that people, on a YouTube video, that people are too simple to rule themselves. And so what do? You trace it to the actual source. You find a transcript of the actual source, and looking at it in context, of course, Obama is not saying that. Obama, in this case, is saying that there are others out there who believe that people are too simple to rule themselves. But of course, democracy rejects that, and that he has a firm belief in people's ability to self-govern. And then our final technique is check other coverage. We ask, what do other sources say? Big stories are generally reported by multiple places. And so when you see something like this looping here, this child trafficking camp in Tucson, you just, before you even read it, just do a search. Just do a search on the terms and see, are other outlets reporting this? In this case, we see other outlets are reporting it, but they're reporting it as a conspiracy theory, right? In another case, we might see some fake news, a death hoax, something like that, and we'll find that maybe there's no reporting on it. In both cases, you'd be very, very suspicious. We use Google News here as a filter. Google News filters out most of what researchers call the ecosystem, which is a group of sort of low-value, non-news sites that produce, produce a lot of sort of inflammatory news. It doesn't remove everything. There's a lot of opinion in here. There's some very partisan news sources that end up in Google News, but it filters out enough that we send students to it. The outcomes here on check other coverage are simple. If it's covered by others, take it seriously. If it's been flagged as a hoax or misinfo, discard it. And if it has no coverage, treat it with suspicion. So again, the idea here is that we're not in 1984 anymore. We're not in a traditional, a traditional 20th century totalitarian regime. We're in a very different world that I think has some very similar risks, in a general way, to what we would have seen mid-20th century. But the mechanisms are really inverted, right? We need to deal with this sort of overwhelming surge of information. We need to deal with it fast and quickly. And what we believe is that if we don't give citizens tools to deal with information overload, they'll choose other ways to economize their efforts. And we see some of these ways online, right? They fall back on tribalism, right? Tribalism is a filter, right? They fall back on conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory is a filter, right? So we need to give students, citizens, and journalists. We actually talked with First Draft, which is a group that trains journalists, and we're very much working in the same area. We need to train this array of people to have these habits and do this every time, right? To do this stuff every time before they share, every time before they cite, and make these sorts of things happen. Deep reading is going to help you, but you have to do the work up front, and you have to do it. You have to do it, quickly and efficiently, with this sort of systemic approach, right? With an approach that's not ad hoc, but actually pulls on what we know are the most efficient ways to quickly categorize So that is, let's see if we, right. I'm forgetting how to switch back here to get out of this, but while I do that, I'll take questions while I'm trying to figure out how to get my camera back up here on the Polycom. Here we go. All right. So are there any questions that people have? We can also do some activities, but I'd love questions. I know I've thrown quite a lot out there, so love any questions. Yeah.
You mentioned that people resort to tribalism on the internet. What do you mean by that?
I'm sorry, I'm missing that. It's a little bit, still a little bit soft here.
What do you mean by tribalism, Mike?
Oh, tribalism. Yeah, so tribalism is just It's our propensity to believe things that come from people like us, whether that is, fellow conservatives, fellow liberals, whether that is definitions by race or religion. So the idea would be that I trust people that are more like me. So if someone more like me is saying that, then I trust them, and if someone less like me is saying that, then I don't. And so tribalism, is something that increases factionalism. It's of course heavily used in authoritarian politics, it also acts as a filter, and that's one of the things I think people haven't fully thought through. One of the reasons why tribalism is so attractive online is you are getting all this information with no idea of how to tell what's true and what's not, and you're getting it, at this fairly high rate. Tribalism solves that for you because you simply believe the stuff that comes from your political tribe or your religious tribe or your, whatever your tribe is. Saw another hand go up somewhere in there, tentatively, or no?
Any other questions?
I have one.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I just want to footnotes. So footnotes aren't a good source of
Interesting. Okay.
I can't say reference, but a good indicator that it's a good source.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there's a number of things you can say about footnotes. One of the things I would say is the footnotes that link to you are much more important than the footnotes you link to, right? So if I'm cited by different journals, that's much more important than whether I cite other people. The footnotes themselves, I mean, the problem is that footnotes are what we would call a surface feature, right? They're a way of citing things. But it's pretty easy to use footnotes. It's pretty easy to use footnotes to fool people, right? I mean, I can put up anything I want, add a bunch of footnotes that lead to rather complex articles, like portray those footnotes as supporting my point. And if you have, 3 hours and a master's degree, you can probably sort that out, right? You can probably sort out whether I'm citing those sources, ethically and responsibly and accurately. If you don't, you're not going to figure it out in 2-3 minutes. There's just no way you're going to do that. I mean, so footnotes are a great resource once you've decided to spend a couple hours with a document in a domain that you know. But the more important thing to figure out is not whether the person is citing something. The more important thing to figure out is whether that person is a knowledgeable and trustworthy source. Because if they're not a knowledgeable and trustworthy source, then all the footnotes in the world aren't going to change that.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mike, just if other people are thinking. As an instructor, one thing that I've always told my students is not to use Wikipedia, and especially as journalists. And what you're showing us here is a step in information literacy incorporating Wikipedia. Can you explain the use of Wikipedia for the
Yeah, sure. So what that study found in their study of how fact checkers operate is that professional fact checkers, and they really picked some of the top fact checkers out there, always go to Wikipedia first. Because Wikipedia, and they've asked them, why do you do that? And people say it may not always be the best source, but it is the most reliable source that you're going to find on that first page, right? You can spot it, and if you can get to the Wikipedia article, you're going to get a good summary of the issue. Now, they don't necessarily stop there. If they see stuff that raises questions, they can go through and they can follow links in this case and see what the links in the Wikipedia article are, right? So they can see, you know, if it says the SPLC says it's a hate group, then they could follow that and see, did the SPLC say it's a hate group, right? And hopefully it's not, you know, hopefully it's cited correctly. But the truth is that Wikipedia ends up being very reliable because when people cite things wrongly in Wikipedia or portray things wrongly, the Wikipedia community is relatively quick to correct that. I mean, they're kind of they're a bit anal in that way. So the idea, I mean, the idea really comes from watching what fact checkers do, and fact checkers always go to Wikipedia first. It's their first stop. It's very often it's enough of a stop to you know, kind of call a halt the process. We come back again to this idea of you know, so we talked about footnotes, right? Footnotes are useful, but only if you can trust the person and organization making the footnotes. Only if you can trust that they're using those footnotes correctly, right? Wikipedia, in general, you can trust it. Wikipedia is dedicated. The people on Wikipedia are dedicated to making sure that everything is correctly cited and work hard to do that. We can also show people, like reporters, need to learn how to look at a Wikipedia edit history and some things like that to just double check that nothing's been messed with and you know, recently. But yeah, absolutely. If you go and you talk to a fact checker and you actually watch how a fact checker works, Wikipedia is the first stop. And I think the most damaging thing we have done to students in teaching them about the web is teach them not to use Wikipedia, because it probably is the primary weapon we have against disinformation currently. Yep.
Just touching on what you said, so is this like a new type of thing where we can trust Wikipedia now? Because just as you said that, me and Tracy have been saying like our whole lives we were told to avoid that website, never to touch it. Plague. Like, so is it a new thing that we can trust it now if you probably know how to use it, or has that always been a thing and we've just been told hidden from that?
Well, I mean, so there's a couple things, right? I mean, the discussion, the thing about not using Wikipedia has generally come out of people that actually don't understand how Wikipedia works. But I will say that the Wikipedia did shift around 2006, 2007 to become an organization. They started the shift in 2006, 2007 to become an organization that was much more concerned about the level of error. So Wikipedia, from 2002 maybe to 2007, was more concerned with getting participation and growing articles than they were concerned with coming down quickly on any inaccuracies in articles. In 2006, 2007, just as they became a resource, they kind of veered the other way and became much more aggressive at stomping out errors as a community. Introduced, a lot of people don't understand the whole bot structure of Wikipedia, but there's a lot of bots that go there and fix vandalism and that sort of thing. So, I mean, is it a new thing? It's not that Wikipedia, I don't think it's certainly not that Wikipedia in the past 5 or 6 years has become more reliable, and that's what we're talking about. It really is, at least if we look at the Wikipedia as we've known it, say post 2008, it really is coming to terms with the fact that if you look at a Google search result, right? If you look at a Google search result and you say, what item on that Google search result for any major term is going to give me the best overall, somewhat agendaless summary of a subject. If you look at this balance of trying to find a lack of bias and agenda and a level of accuracy on that first page of Google results. The thing that will usually get that balance the best is going to be the Wikipedia article. Yeah, I mean, interesting question. Like, is it a shift in the quality? I mean, Wikipedia has gotten better, but I think I've been saying, use Wikipedia first for 10 years.
But not
Where have you been my entire schooling career?
What's that?
Where have you been my entire schooling career?
Well, I mean, and part of the thing is, it gets confusing because you shouldn't cite Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is only as good as the stuff that it's citing itself, right? So, but that's true of Encyclopedia Britannica. Like if you're in school, you don't cite Encyclopedia Britannica as your source. You go and you find some original sources when you're doing research, and so it still is a good idea not to cite Wikipedia directly, but you should always go. I'm at a research university, and I talk to people that are involved in neuroscience and laser physics and all sorts of things. And what they'll tell me is whenever they're doing research and they start to get into an area that is somewhat new to them, if they need a summary of it, the first place they go is Wikipedia. It's just usually the best first stop for things.
Thank you.
Can we practice this a bit, Mike? Because I know you have a hard stop.
Yep.
We've got 20 minutes left. So if everybody wants to open up their laptops and go to 4 moves, please.
Oh.
Okay. Under week 7. So it'll just take a moment for them to log in.
Sure.
But I think everyone's got it ready to go.
Sure, I'll pull up my prompts that I just gave you here. Right.
So now all of a sudden.
So what you'll be seeing as you pull this up is our 4 Move site, and we store a bunch of prompts for students to do this to practice these skills.
Sorry, I'm just going to pause just for 1 second. Just to be clear, do not do a search for 4 moves. Go into DC Connect, week 7. There's a link there inside DC Connect. And I'm just going to see if maybe I can bring it up. I don't know. Can you bring it up on the screen, or I can bring it up? I'm going to bring it up on the screen here, Mike.
Great.
Oh, I can't. Are you able to put that on your computer? And Elgin can pull it forward so the students can see what you're looking at?
Yeah. So let's let me pull it. I'll just pull up the 4 moves one. And then, so if you go to 4 moves and then type in snow in the, go up and do the search and type in snow in the Sahara, and we'll get started with that. Let me share my desktop one, and then so look for snow in the Sahara. And the way you would do that if you don't know is you just do this. So the question we're going to ask here is, you get this, and I don't know, it comes in and comes into Facebook or Twitter or gets mailed to you as a text message and has some sort of heading like "Snow in the Sahara, Al Gore can suck it." And the question is, apart from the framing, did this happen, right? And so let's see if we can find out in the next minute or a minute and a half. A, did it snow in the Sahara in early, I think, 2018? And B, is this image from that event? So I'll let you guys go to it.
Okay. Did it snow in the Sahara Desert? That's the question.
Yeah, did it snow in the Sahara in, I think it's 2018, January 2018 or something? And is this picture a picture of snow in the Sahara? So just use your quick investigative skills to figure that out.
No, it's not.
Okay, and we'll give everybody about 60 seconds to find the best possible source on this, and then we'll see what people think.
No, I know it's not the picture. When I search the picture, that's what I know.
That's the picture, right? Is that the picture?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
If you right click the image, you can search Google. See, so like.
it's not the Sahara. Where is that? Check and see where that. Aren't we just looking? It did snow. That's one question. The other question is the picture correct? I don't think the picture is correct. I think this is the actual picture.
Yeah.
It didn't snow that much. There wasn't that much white on the ground.
Look at it.
It's too much white. Is this snow? No, it's snow.
No, I know the exact picture.
Yeah, it has it is snow, and is that a picture of the Sahara Desert? It is a picture of the Sahara Desert, but it's not. There was not that much snow.
So I think it did snow. Clearly.
Yes,
Clearly
correct.
snow. But it's
That's
just a picture of the Sahara.
the picture is not. Yeah, pink.
In about 15 more seconds.
See, this
If you come through this, try to also figure out what your best source that you found is so far. Do a quick analysis of in your search what the best source either for or against this is.
Oh.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So let's throw up a hand, and I'll have Teresa select one of you. Throw up a hand. Let's start with question number 1. Did it snow in the Sahara in January 2018? Just answer that first question. I see a hand behind you there, Teresa.
Yes.
On the couch.
All right, Manic.
Actually, it did, and my resource for this one is Forbes and CNN.
So according
Forbes
to Forbes,
and CNN, yeah. So, and how did you find that? What were your did you use search terms or use another technique?
Actually, I just cited for the CNN.com and searched for the.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a basic principle, right? That if there are big stories, generally multiple outlets cover them. You can even go to your favorite outlet to see if there is some coverage in that, right? So you can look at a story that you think is big enough to be covered by multiple outlets, and you go and you check those outlets. Question number 2: is this picture a picture of snow in the Sahara? A little more doubt here. I know this is a little harder, but throw a hand up, somebody. Come on, you know you want to do it. Yeah, back on the couch, the longer couch.
I don't think.
Yeah,
sorry. Tracy.
I don't think it is.
Okay. Why don't you think it is?
Because I'm on the I guess a website about Times of India, and it's citing the photo is from 2 individuals, which I assume are most likely maybe photographers.
Yep.
And then at the bottom also shows the exact same picture with less snow. So I'm assuming, I don't think it snowed that much.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, you're half right here. So if you see here, we can actually do a reverse image search on this by right-clicking and then going to Google, and we see a bunch of different things. We can actually find, so the Times of India article here, I think you can actually get to, if you go down, you can actually get to a National Geographic article. But it is the case that if you pull it up and you see the variety of images, you will find. Why it's throwing something over my screen because it wants to give me an ad. You will find that it is here. It is cited, and then there's this other one here. And so In this case, it's not the case that one is fake and another is not, but it does seem to be the case that, as you may know, there's a lot of wind in the Sahara Desert, and so the shot that you're looking at is the most exaggerated looking shot of the snow. And if you actually go through and you dig into it deeper, you'll find that there's 15 inches snow. The actual reports from the more reputable sources end up saying it's 2 to 3 inches snow. But again, it's blown around here enough that it's pooled in this way. But again, just some very simple techniques: searching either known sources, searching on search terms. I heard some people did a reverse search on the image. If you actually look at this, one of the things we work with students is we tell students to be careful what they search for, right? So for instance, when we search this, what's the problem with saying, oh, I'm going to search for 15 inches of snow in the Sahara Desert? What's the problem with using that as a search term?
Because it's not current. It may be not from the same timeline.
Yeah, it could. The 15 inches could be wrong, right? And you have what we call confirmation bias built into that source. So that is going to tend to pull up sources that say it's 15 inches, but not pull up things that say it's 2 inches, right? And so we try to get students to genericize the terms as much as possible. Snow in the Sahara, not 15 inches snow in the Sahara. But try to get them to make sure that they're crafting those search terms in that way. Let's do another one. We have time for maybe two more. Let's look at. Let's look for. Oh, geez, I should have. Let's do this 1950s kneeling. So put in 1950s kneeling, and let's take a look at this one. I know we're doing a bunch of images here, but a lot of times we start with images. Students just get more engaged with the images, and then we move to more textual stuff. But so the question here is: this is said, white baseball players. A picture of white baseball players kneeling in the 1950s to protest black lynchings. So the question is that what this picture is? Okay, actually, I'm seeing people coming to this really fast, and that's good. But so let's give you 30 more seconds on this. And so what I want to know is whether it is true or not. I want to know where this came from, and what the background of this picture is. Is it really white baseball players kneeling in the 1950s, right? To protest black lynchings.
Okay, so this is the history of it.
First reverse search, it just says I'm not doing anything.
And then I clicked on that, and this is like, and it doesn't say 50s, it says 1936.
1936, pitching staff.
Okay, and we'll wrap it up here in a minute or so. See what people have. Okay, so let's start out with this. We usually do this in stages in the class. So the first question we ask is this picture real and unaltered, right? Is this picture real and unaltered? I see a hand up on the back couch.
It's real.
And it's from
and it doesn't look altered.
It's real and it's not altered, correct? Is it properly contextualized?
Yeah.
No, it's not properly contextualized. What's the actual context of this photo?
It's just the pitching staff of the 1936 Yankees.
Yeah, it's just the pitching staff. I don't know if you've ever played a sport, but sometimes you got to get everybody into a picture, and so the people in front kneel down and the people in the back stand up. And so in this case, they have the pitching staff, the 4 people in the pitching staff in the front kneeling down. Where's the photo come from? How did this photo come about? I'm sorry, I see some hands up, but
it's from the 1936.
Yep, the photo's from 1936. Who is responsible for captioning this way? How'd that start?
Actually, it was from a prank website, Breaking News 247.
Yeah,
they did the prank in 2017.
Yeah, so there's a site called Breaking News 24/7, and this is a site that you can use to prank your friends, but sometimes people use it to prank everybody. And you go to the site, you upload a picture, you put in a headline, a little blurb text, and it makes it look like it's a newspaper article that you can share. Facebook now blocks that particular site, but there's lots of sites up like this. It's sort of a make your own hoax site. There's a couple ways, obviously, you can do this. You can always do this search Google for image, which will actually give you if you search Google for image and then you'll see immediately 1936 New York Yankees and so forth. But if you do that, you can see that the fact check floats up to the top here from Snopes. Snopes is a good source especially on this hoax stuff. And so you could use that. But of course, you can also go and take the text of this to see if anybody has covered that as well. And you'll see the Snopes pops up here, as well as some stuff here that is actually been fooled by it, right? Again, clicking over to that news tab often filters out a lot of the junk and will float a better source to the top. Let's try. Pizza potholes. Do you have Domino's Pizza up there? Yeah?
I lived in the States for a number of years. I'm like, wait a minute, which country am I in?
Okay. So here's a story. Domino's is filling potholes in selected towns and putting their logo on them because they say that someone already heard about that. Okay. All right. You know what? We can do a different one if you've already heard about it. All right. Let's do a different. No. People already saw it. You know, when I first did it, it was just out, and so no one had heard of it yet, and it sounded very fake. Let's try this. This one here is that Vietnamese bachelorettes reject bachelor. So this is the idea that on a Vietnamese version of The Bachelor, contestants on it. What's that?
Knew it. Got it. Did it. Saw it.
Got it. Yeah. It's real. Okay, it's real.
It's real. She's gay, and she asked one of the contestants to go home with her.
Yeah, and now they're dating.
And they're not anymore.
Aww.
They broke up.
Yes.
You're too up on this stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this process though, because it does show how the process works. Simple things like the hover, like always hover, right? You see something on Twitter, journalists, like it doesn't matter how many times you see it, even if you see that check mark, the check mark just means it's verified as a person. To know what they're about, to know who they work for, you got to hover. So make a habit of always hovering, always reading that, always making sure that, again, are you surprised by this or not? In this case, we're not surprised. We think it's NBC News. We look at it, it says it's the leading source. It's got a blue check mark for verification. And we see a lot of followers here that would be consistent with the idea that it's really NBC News. So a lot of learning some of these simple verification things can help. Again, the main idea here is to get things down to this sort of level of muscle memory. And where you see something like this, before you click on this, before you read on it, before you do anything, you hover over, you say, okay, this is what I think it is, and you click through. And don't go any further until you do it. Same thing with stuff in the Omnibar, typing in Wikipedia, making sure the organization is what you think it is. Always doing these things, taking the 30 seconds before you read something to make sure it is what you think it is, to make sure it's the best possible source, to make sure that it hasn't been altered in its flow across the web. That's going to save you embarrassment. And if you're a journalist, it will save your professional career, right? Building that habit. Always check. I compare all this stuff to when you change lanes in your car, you check your mirrors, right? You don't change lanes without checking if someone's next to you, and you don't say, well, I feel like I haven't passed anybody, so there's probably nobody in my blind spot. You always check, right? You always check. And it's just simpler to check than not to check. And that, I think, if you do go into journalism, building that habit may save your career and democracy as well. So that's it.
Thank you so very much, Mike. And we have 30 seconds to say thanks so much to you and wish you well on your day. Can we give Mike a nice